make a sound so I can see if things are.
Yeah, I can hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
That's awesome, and we can hear you on Twitch as well, and everything should be okay. So I am a little low on battery on one of my computers, but I will try to make sure that I can survive this session one way or another. All right, so people, last time around we were doing some code along on the address book challenge, and the idea is that we will continue to do that a little bit just to practice the way of thinking of how to test various things, unit tests, and write some acceptance tests and so on. So hopefully we get a good session and make good progress. Last time I was able to share a little bit of documentation. Unfortunately, the rest of that exercise is still a bit experimental, so I don't have much documentation written about that. But I will try to keep the pace down and make sure that everyone can follow along as good as possible. Now, before we move on, I just want to address the recent change, and I'm really sorry about the switch from Tuesdays and Thursdays to Wednesdays and Fridays. I understand that some people find it hard to fit this into their schedule. Hopefully they will be able to follow along by catching the recordings, but my schedule just changed. My Tuesdays and Thursdays became filled up with work-related stuff that I can't move. Unfortunately, we all have to make a living, so voluntary work had to make way for that. Daniel, are you okay with Wednesdays and Fridays instead of Tuesdays and Thursdays?
Oh, fine by me. Fine by me.
All right. And Carl, how are you doing on that?
It also works for me.
Good stuff. Good stuff. All right. Then we'll see if other folks will be able to join us. Let's hope for the best. Let's hope for the best. But if it doesn't work out for them, they can at least follow along in by checking out the recordings. Hopefully that will work. Right. So let's head over to some coding. Terminal. There we are. Okay. So I had a lesson. We had address book, right? So check in. CD into the address book challenge, and I'm going to open this up in code like this. All right.
I have a question right away.
Yes, go ahead.
In the index HTML, we added that we load the JavaScript files.
Mm-hmm.
And I believe we just did that to test about exporting like the JavaScript module to show that there's an error with the one code and not with the other.
Mm-hmm.
Do we need it for the rest of this exercise?
Oh yes, we will be using both address book and app.js. Yeah.
Okay, I need to add it.
Yeah. They will be added. They will be used, of course, by the application. Now, the reason why we added them early on in the game was to make sure, or well, yeah, A, to make sure that this still works, and B, to prove a concept that these things actually are related. Just that they will be used by this application. Under normal circumstances, I would probably add them a little later, but it was a part of the setup process, basically, for this particular application. That make sense?
Yeah, I just didn't add the app.js because
it's empty. It's empty.
Later.
Yeah. So you can add it now or you can add it later, but it will be added sooner or later, basically.
I'll do it now. I don't think.
Good stuff. a word of caution here, right? Well, word of caution or not, but I just want to clarify something. Now, usually when we work in this acceptance unit test cycle, we actually run acceptance tests first, and then when we need our units, that's when we write those unit tests. Now, in this example, we break away from that for various reasons. First of all, we need to configure stuff first before we start the development, right? We want to have a good development environment set up for us, and all the tools and so on need to be set up and configured. That's one thing. But the second thing is also that we kind of start to develop a little bit as part of the configuration process, which is just an example of how easy it is to, you know, have principles and how hard it is to live up to them sometimes, right? You know, there are quite a lot of people that are like really strict about test-driven development or behavior-driven development, and that sounds great in theory, but in practical terms, sometimes you just have to break a few rules, so you can move forward. And this is an example of that. That sometimes you can't be too strict on following a specific doctrine or a flow, because it doesn't work from a practical perspective. So I just wanted to mention that I'm aware of that. I'm breaking with the theoretical best practice, but in this case, it just wouldn't work to do it any other way, the way I look at it. You know, people might have different opinions, of course. I don't know if this makes sense to you, but I just wanted to get it out there. Now, let's see if we can do a little bit of recap here, what it is that we've actually done. Before I just need to pull up a few notes that I have on this. Right, here it is. Okay. So we have this index.html that will hold our address book. There is nothing there so far, just an H1 saying address book, and we're including this this JS file that we started to work on that will hold the address book logic. And then we have another one that perhaps was added a bit prematurely, that is app.js. And in this app.js file, I will place later on, that will be filled with JavaScript that relates to modifying or updating the user interface, and the address book will be like the logical file that will actually allow us to store and retrieve those address entries that we will be using local storage for, right? And for now, that class is just an empty class. There's nothing there. We haven't created any methods, any functions in this address book class. So we have plenty of things to do there. The app.js is again totally empty. There's not much there, but we do have a unit spec that tests whether this an instance of this address book is actually an object or an actual instance of the address book. And that was just like an example of my of tests that we can write in Mocha and Chai. Now, what I also talked about last time was this this mechanism that we will be using for storage, and that would be the local storage. That is a very similar or a sibling to session storage, and the difference between session storage and local storage was covered by me. Session storage have a short lifespan to the end of the session, where we actually close the browser or close the tab. That storage is being purged or reset, whereas local storage has a longer lifespan. It can persist over many visits or many you know, whether many visits to the same URL, basically. So we're gonna start today's sessions with focusing a little bit on the local storage, because I did mention that in Node.js, which is the environment that we will be using while running tests, there is no such thing as local storage. We're gonna have to fake that a little bit. So in order to do that, we're gonna have to add a little bit of functionality to our spec helper. And I will actually add it right here inside of the spec helper to start with. And then later I will refactor this by extracting that to another file and make it available by the spec helper. But that's going to be the last step that we will be doing. But we know already now that we will be dependent on local storage, and therefore we will hold off on starting the acceptance unit test approach and focus on doing a little more configuration, a little more setup, so that we can actually write our code properly later on. And that would, so our task at this point is to configure local storage in Node.js and bind it to the global object. Okay, and so for that, I'm actually going to test drive that. I'm going to create a new file, and I want to call this file local storage.spec.js. Local storage.spec.js. And in this file, I'm going to add a describe block. And the describe block will just say that we are going to test local storage, like this. And I want to add a subject first. The first thing I want to do is to add a subject. And so subject will be a callback function like this, like this. And that would be window local storage. Local storage, which is exactly what we would be using if we were in a browser, right? The problem is that we don't have that. This doesn't exist at this point. In Node.js, there is no such thing as window local storage, yet we want to use it as a subject. Now, let's play ball. Let's indulge me and follow along on this one. But if we had window local storage, then we would like it to respond to a few functions. You remember I was telling you last time about the get item, set item, remove item, and clear functions, right? These are the four functions that we will be using if we had local storage available to us here. And we will, when this application is run in the browser, here we need to fake it. So we would say something like it is expected to respond to. Oh shit! I have a autocomplete that is pissing me off a little bit. Respond to, and the function name would be set item, for instance, right? And now I can just copy this here, and we want to respond to a get item function. We want it to respond to a remove item, and we also want this to respond to clear. These are the four functions that we need to fake in order to be able to continue to develop the address book. So if I want to run this now, So I can do yawn test, and I think I can do spec tests units, and then local storage spec. I think I can do that. Right, and they are fail for me. But actually, he ran the address book, so I couldn't. So in Mocha, it's hard to point the runner to a specific file, or at least I don't know how to do that at this point. All of these failed because there is no such thing as window, as we predicted. So we can do that. We can add that by just saying global.window is an object in our spec helper. We can, as very similar to what we did by extending the global object with expect and sign on, we can extend it with a window attribute and just set it to an object. So if I run this again, I will see that we changed the error message at this stage, and it doesn't say that window is not, what was it say? Window is not defined. Now it says cannot read property get item of undefined, right? So a little bit of progress, but we haven't fixed that yet. What we could do now is to say that global.window.local storage is an object, and that will probably change the method as well, or change the error message. Let's see what happens. Let's run this again. And now we have a different error message on all of these four tests. Now he says that expected this object to respond to set item. We don't have anything like that. That's going to be very easy for us to fix, because in this object we can just define a few functions. So we can say get item would be a function, and then we would say set item, that will also be a function, and then we would say remove item as a function, and then clear as a function, like this, right? So this is an object, and we know that functions can be attributes as well, so we can do all of that. And if we run this now, we should go green on all of these, because we do respond to these functions. Now, if they were just simple attributes, just to, I was talking to you guys about the fact that if something passes, you should try to break this from time to time. So let's say we change the get item to an attribute that just holds this an object. If I run these tests now, this one will pass. The get item test will, this will fail. The get item will fail. This needs to be a function in order for this matcher that is called respond to take this, right? So let's change this back to a function and run the specs again, and we should be good to go. Right. Okay, so let's take a look at the get item. Or you know what? Let's start with the set item function, right? Because it's a bit easier for us. Now, if we would head over to the browser again, just to recap some stuff, and I would open up the developer tools, this, and go to my console and clear this, right? So we know that local storage set item takes two arguments. It takes the first argument would be the name of the key, and the second argument would be the actual value. Somebody raised a hand, or what happened? Oh, Stella. Hello, Stella. Nice to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you.
I think this is the first time you're joining us, right?
Yes, and I have no idea what's going on.
Okay. Well, we are going through some testing recipes. We will build a small exercise or a small application rather that is called it's going to be an address book, and for that we're going to use local storage in our browser.
Oh.
Right. So I was just explaining to the guys that since our tests are being run in Node, and unit tests are not being run in the browser, we need to fake local storage. We don't have that available for us. So we're in the process of building that at this point.
Okay.
All right, thank you. So just tag along if you want, and feel free to ask questions if there's anything you wonder about.
Yeah, sure.
All right.
Thomas,
So-
I have a question.
Go ahead.
The local storage we faked, is that also mocking? Is that still under the umbrella of mocking?
In a way, yes. In another way, not. Right. So we're
How
not.
would you put it in your words? What we did?
It's gonna be. Yeah, that's a good question, because we could potentially mock this in using sign-on or stub it using sign-on. I chose to do an implementation all by myself, because in this particular case it's easier. So I would call this a fake implementation. Is that like a fake object?
Okay.
So yeah, that's because you see, local storage will not be used, as part of our implementation in our, in the code that we write. We will just assume in our code that local storage actually exists in our environment, which will be the browser. So that's it's not really fair to say that it's a mock. I wouldn't say that. I don't know if that clarifies it for you, but that's it's kind of hard to put words on it.
Which helps. I mean, you're more experienced, and yeah. And I understood if we were to mock it, we'd use sign-on, but this is something so simple we don't need to.
Right. Or it's so far out from our own code. This is like an underlying technology that we just assume will work in our real environment. Again, that will be the browser. It doesn't exist in our test environment. Therefore we need to create it for ourselves.
Okay.
All right. So what we see here is that this method setItem, it requires two attributes: the key name and the value that will be stored. So if I execute this now and just check what local storage is, we can see that we've stored the key foo and then some value, right? So this means that our setItem function here needs to take two arguments, key and value, at least. And then we need to do something with that here. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's write a test for this. So here, once I'm done with all these basic tests respond to, they are passing for me now. I want to start describing the setItem function. So I'm going to create a new describe block and do that. Right. So I want to let's see, what do I want to do? Yeah, well, I want to do a before block first. Oh, why are you not giving me before that? There we go, before block, like this. And before I do anything, I already have my subject. So before I execute each test, or the test that will follow, I want to say $subject. I want to invoke the function. So I want to set this item to, let's say, foo bar. yeah, and then I want to have an assertion or a test that would say it is expected to store the value in the key in the chosen key. Right, the key is foo, and so this should be bar somehow, right? Go. So I'm going to make this a little smaller. Actually, I can remove that for now. Right. So we can say expect subject expect subject, and then we want to use we will store everything in a key that is called data. I will explain that in just a second why, but we want to say that we want to use this method to have own property foo. That's what it's right. So we need this subject to have this own property foo, and then we also probably at this stage want to say that it why don't you give me a follow-up, is expected to store to store the value in the chosen, that was chosen key here. I'm gonna rewrite this one, the first one actually. Sorry about that. There we go. Right, so this is to store to add the chosen key, to add, to create, or to add, let's say that. And then we would just say expect I'm going to turn off this guy. Yeah, I'm going to turn this off. It pisses me off a little bit. So I would say something like right, subject dot data dot foo to equal, let's see, is it just equal like this? I think it is, to equal bar, right? Yeah. So if we choose, so we're going to use this set item function, and if it works, then we should add a property called foo that should have the value of bar. The wording in the message is a little off, but I can't come up with something better, so we can live with that for now.
Well, one thing we could improve,
Hmm?
you know, to store add the chosen key on the first it.
Once again?
You wrote to store add. We can get rid of store.
Right, there we go. Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. All right, so both of them are failing for us, not at this point. And here we need to do a little bit of trade-offs and compromise a little bit, because usually in local storage we store the values directly, so we are adding the keys directly to the local storage object. In our fake implementation, we won't be able to do that. We need to intermediately store this in some sort of an object. So I'm going to create a data attribute and set it to an empty string, to an empty object. And if I run this now, it will have a different error message. But the big thing for us is we need to use this key and value that we pass into the set item to to modify the data object. So what we could do is to say the value. So we can say const value no, sorry, no. I want to say this data, this dot data, which is this object, right? And the key of that data, so we're just going to pass in key, and that would be set to value. That's it. And we will not return anything from this function. This is the only thing we need to do to modify, to add this to the data object. So if we run the test now, we will be going green on this, because now data will be set for us. But at this stage, you see, we are jumping back and forward between the IDE and our terminal to run our tests. There is actually a better way to do that, and that is to use the debugger in our IDE, because then I will be able to set debugger statement like this in my code. When I execute this in my terminal, this debugger has no effect whatsoever. It will not halt the execution. There are other ways to debug in Node, of course, but at this stage, I think that would be a little bit of an overkill. It is easier for us to set up the debugging flow in our tool, in our IDE. So in order to do that, on the side you have this run and debug menu that you can click on, and then you have to choose the option to create a launch.json file to start with. So let's click on that, and you will see this pop up and the selector show up on your screen. And here you want to choose Node.js to get started. And what will happen is that a launch.json file will be created for you with some comments. You can remove those comments if you want. There's a version, keep that, and then there is a configurations key that holds an array, and that array will hold our config and the configuration. This is an object. What we want to do here, nice and easy, is to remove the object that has been added for us automatically. Just simply delete that. And instead, I want us to configure this ourselves, and that would require us to do the following. We want to create a new object, just an empty object to start with, and we will give it an attribute or another key, and the type would be PWA node, like this. Another key would be the request key, and that would be launch, like this. And then we will give it a name, and the name would be something like run Mocha, for instance. And then we want to skip some files, we're going to say skip files. And the files we want to skip are also an array. And we want to say, let's see, as a string, we want to say node internals. And then close this tag. And then outside of this tag, just do a wildcard like this. So this is the we don't want to run any or yeah, we don't want to preload the node internals on this one. It's not needed for anything. And so the next key, you see, there's a lot of configuration. The program. And here we're just going to go with an empty array for now, empty string for now. And then we want to add the last one, that would be arguments. And that would also be an array. And here we will add similar things that we did in package.json when we were executing Mocha. If you jump over there for a second, we can see that we have Mocha, file spec, spec helper, ubdd, lazyvar, and all of that stuff, right? We want to do a similar thing here. So I want to say -- file, and then comma, and I would say dot. No, I want to say spec helper .js. I want to add another comma here, a new line. I want to say -u to load the BDD lazy var / global, like this. And then we want to add recursive, for instance, recursive, and we want to add exit, like this. And then we want to say, with curly brackets and a dollar, no, outside here, right, a dollar, sorry, $, curly brackets, going to be like string interpolation, and we're just going to say workspace folder, and then specs /unit / and then wildcards, and .spec.js, workspace folder, but on the program we want to say, and I'm a bit unsure about this actually, but I think we need to say, right, we need to say workspace folder here as well, so I can just copy that, and then /node modules /mocha /bin /_mocha, if I not, yeah. So we need to point this guy to the Mocha executable, like this, right? And this is pretty much the same command that we were adding in the package.json file, but it's a different structure on it. I think this is correct. How can I figure it out? Well, I can click on the menu that will on the debug and run and debug menu, and then here I will have this pull down. I need to have run Mocha selected, which is the equivalent of what we just typed here, and click on the green button. and that will run some stuff, and it will say that there were 0 passing. Specs, units, right, unit, and because I call it units and not unit, so there's a typo here. I need to change that to units and run this again. And we can run them. And as you see, my debugger now is kicking in. You see, I can see that that the execution has been stopped. And here, I can now type subject, for instance. Subject. And we can see that this subject actually contains the object that we created for local storage, and we can see that those functions are there and data is there, and we can see that data contains foo and bar. And if I want to continue the execution, I can just click on this continue or press F5 up in the in the toolbar, and that would be all good. The error message will still show here. We can see that it should have the chosen key. Now in this case, we exceeded the timeout, so I can probably make that bigger for us, but it doesn't really matter at this stage. If I just remove the debugger again and run those tests automatically, we can see that we have everything passing. There is actually one more setting I can add to the launch JSON, and that is to say --color, like this, and don't forget the comma. And now when we run this, we will get a colored output instead, as you can see, which is much better for us. Does that make sense? Would you like me to send that configuration for you in chat so you get it from me instead of having to write it up yourself?
That is exactly what I want to ask.
Right.
Okay. Yes, I would appreciate that as well, Thomas.
Yeah, I knew you would say that. That's why I asked. That's why I asked. So I will send that in Slack because it takes Markdown. So you can see in the work the web Slack channel. Right. All right. Good stuff. And Chima, how you doing? Hope you can join us on the Slack call. That would be very nice. Right. So now we don't have to run our tests directly in the terminal. Now we can run everything in VS Code, and that's pretty convenient, actually. That's pretty convenient. And you can see my screen still, right? Okay. So let's forget about the launch JSON file for a second. We know it works, so we should be good. And our test regarding the set item works. So now we can focus on the next topic, which would be, let's say, the get item, right? So these two tests are passing. Let's create a new describe block. So describe, and we will test the get item. And in the there are two scenarios here. First of all, the happy path is when we get an item that actually exists in local storage, and the sad path would be to get an item or try to get an item that doesn't exist in local storage. So if it doesn't exist, it should return nil, and if it exists, yeah, if it doesn't exist, we should get a return nil, and if it does exist, we should get the value back, right? We can say context, and we will say existing key, and then we're going to create another context, and we'll say non-existing key, right? Okay, so if we try to access an existing key, then we can write something like this. First of all, we need to define the response. So the subject is window local storage. Now we want to look at the value that is being returned to us, right? So we will query for it, and we will see what we will get in response. So using the BDD lazy var, we can do something like this: define response as a string, and then as a second argument, we want to have a callback, and that would be the subject get item. That's what we're gonna test, get item, and we want to get the item with the capital I, thank you, and we want to get the item that will be called foo, right? So just to recap, if we go to our browser, if I want to use get item, the get item uses takes one argument, and that is the key name, right? So if I do foo like this, it returns the value. So this guy needs to take at least one argument, or one argument. So that is what we will be passing in here. Now remember that this before block only applies to this particular describe block. So we need to add a new one here. We will say before like this, and now that we know that the set item works, so we can use that. So we can say before this, we want to execute this code: subject set item, and it will be, we will set so foo, and that will be baz. Let's say let's use another value instead than the one that we used in the previous section, just for the sake of it. And so here we could write two tests. For instance, we can say it is expected to return the value, and the other it will be it is expected to return a string, because we set a string as the value, right? So we baz is a string, so we could check for that. I don't know if that's really necessary, but we could do something like what? Well, it's always going to be a string actually, but the value, we could say expect the response, and that would be $response, right, to equal baz. That's what we need to get back from this guy if this works. And if it doesn't work, then it doesn't work, right? Okay. Expect response to equal baz. Yeah, let's try that. And we want this to be a string, so we could say expect type of response to equal a string. Right, that's one way of writing this. We could write this to B type of string. Yeah. Well, let's try that first. We can refactor this later. So let's see if we can run this guy. And if I want to scope down the runners, because I don't want to run all my tests at this stage, I can just add a .only key to this context. And again, I want to run this inside of my IDE, so I'm gonna do that. And we get a lot of errors, of course, because we haven't written any implementation yet. If we take a look at our spec helper, the get item is totally empty, right? So we know that we are looking for a key. So we need to allow this guy to take a key, and then we want to say something like const value equals this dot data and the key itself that we just passed in. And here we just want to say return value. Well, we don't condition that yet, but this would be the implementation for this get item function. So let's run this again, see if we get a different output. I can make this bigger, run this again, and now we are getting this. This is passing for us, and we're good to go on this one. Now, what happens if we try to do the same thing but with key that simply doesn't exist? Oh, I see Anya joined us. Doing, Anya? Right. So if we want to do something like getting something that simply doesn't exist, then we can define a new. We're going to jump into that particular context. We're going to define a new response. We will say again response, and you can reuse those names because they are run in isolation. This one will never be executed if we run this context, so we're good to go on that one. And again, a callback like this. And here we just want to say subject get item, and here we want to get something that does not exist. So we're just going to say non-existing key. We don't have that, simply. It just doesn't exist. And here we will not have any before blocks because we don't actually want to set any items at all. We're going to go straight to the it blocks, to the test itself. And here we will just say is expected to return null, right? It's not supposed to return anything for us. And so we will just write one single thing, expect response to equal, and that would be null, like this. And now I don't want to run this anymore, so I'm going to remove the dot only from line 26, and I'm going to set dot only here and execute this file or this context. And he said expected undefined to deeply equal null. We got an undefined instead of null. All right, fair enough. That's what test-driven development does for us sometimes, I guess. We're going to go over to the implementation. And here, the only thing we need to do is to basically ask value, hi value, are you set to something? Are you defined or not defined? So we can use a ternary operator, and we can say that if value is set to something, or if it exists, then we return value. Otherwise, we return null. Null, like this. So we are trying to access this data, this key, In this case, it will be non-existing key. It simply doesn't, it's not there. And if this is never being set to anything, then we will get null. In the first scenario that we wrote, it will be set to something because we did set it, and then, therefore our previous test did pass. So let's see if we can run this again. It was failing for us just a second ago. We added a little bit of code, and now it does return null, so we're good to go on this one. All right. And if we want to double check things, just for the sake of it, we can set a debugger here, like this, execute the test file again. It stops at that particular, I can show you that. It stops at that particular line of code, and I have access to this console, and here I can say, for instance, this. I'm in the implementation code, so we can see what it is. The entire object is visible to us. Data is totally empty. We can take a look at the key that we passed in. That is still called non-existing key. So if I would like to execute this code, saying this dot data, that would be an empty object, and this dot data and key would also be just undefined, right? So that's pretty good. We can continue the execution. Again, the timeout is doing its job, and we can just rerun this again just to make sure that everything is passing. Awesome. All right, so the next thing we would focus on is probably the remove key functionality that is part of the local storage, right? So again, if I want to do local storage remove key, move key, and we wanted to remove foo in this case, right. Remove item. It's not called the remove key. It's called the remove item. Sorry about that. Remove item, foo, boom, and now local storage is empty because I just removed it. So this one takes one argument as well. We have to take that into consideration. And we're going to go over to our test file. We're going to create a new describe block, and we're going to say that we're going to test the remove item thing. And here we want to, of course, create this let's see, we want to create right, exactly. Let's see, what do I want to do? Yeah, well, let's do yeah, okay. So before I do things, I want to say I want to set two items. So I'm going to say subject set item, and I'm going to just say foo and bar, like this, potentially, and then another subject set item, because I need probably two items in this thing, item, and I'm going to call this one, you know, key to remove, and here I'm just going to say some value, like this. So now I will have both foo and key to remove as attributes. And so I will now say something like it is expected to remove remove the key or the item, the item of it. Yeah, we can probably rephrase that later. So here I want to do two things, right? For the most part in these examples we've been executing code in the before blocks and then just run assertions in the it blocks, but we should never forget that we can also execute code inside of the it block. So let's do that here. We can say subject remove item, and now we're just going to pass in one thing, and that would be the key to remove. That's the key that we will be removing. And now I can show you an example of the negative assertion. So we can do subject data, because we know that if it exists, it will exist in data. And so we can now say to not have own property and then key to remove, right? This one should not exist anymore. Whoops. Oh, there we go. Right. So now I want to remove the dot only from the previous context that I was running and add it to this one like this. And we can execute this file, and this will fail for us, hopefully. Yep. Object data not to have own property key to remove, but it now had key to remove. So we're gonna set a debugger, and now I'm going to show you another way of setting debuggers, because up until now I was doing this, which is totally fine, but I can save myself a few seconds by just clicking outside of the line of code and just setting this red dot here. This red dot will force the executor or the runner to stop here. So line 57 will be executed, but line 58 will not. So let's run this, and lo and behold, we are stopping our execution on line 58 without having to use the debugger keyword. So let's have a look at subject again. Make this bigger. Let's do subject, and we have the entire object here. We're going to take a closer look at data, and look, data actually still contains the key to remove, right? And why does it do it? Well, because we haven't written any code in that remove function yet. It's totally empty. The implementation is extremely simple on this one. The only thing we need to do here is to make sure that we pass in a key as an argument, and then we just tell our JavaScript to delete this .data key like this, and that's the only thing we need to do. And now when we run this spec, I can remove the breakpoint. I don't need it for anything. I can run this, and this spec is passing for us. So we're good to go on that. The next thing, and actually the final thing that we wanted to do is to take a look at the clear method. We already work with set item, get item, and remove item. Now the last thing is to fake or write a fake implementation for the clear method. So you know the drill by now, right? We add a new describe block. We're going to tell this guy that we're going to be looking at the clear function. And here we just want to, well, we could actually copy this before block just to make things a little easier for us. So foobar baz and some value, whatever, right? And then we want to, or actually we can call it key 1 for a change in key 2. the value doesn't matter at all what it is. And so here we could say it is expected to clear all data. To clear all data, it is expected, right? So we're going to execute the code in here. So we're going to say subject dot clear like this, and it is expected to clear all data. So we could say, well, to clear, perhaps not all data, we can say clear key 1. Oh, let's say clear data actually. I don't know. So we can say expect subject dot data, right? Not have own property key 1, right? We should probably write something about key 2, or no, let's you know what, let's not set key 2 at all. It's enough. And we can move this. We'll move this down. Go ahead, Carl.
No, that was my question. I was going to ask, why aren't we doing the clear in the block?
Yeah. No, exactly. That's not needed. I think this will be better, right? We just set it in the before block, and then in the it block we clear it, and then we just check that it doesn't have this property. I think this is enough. Right. So let's just do dot only here, and then we're gonna run this little sucker. Let's make this bigger. Right, and it shouldn't be there, but it is there, right? Because we didn't write any implementation. So this implementation is even simpler than many others. So we can just say clear. We don't need any arguments, and we just say this dot data equals an empty object, like this. And now when we run this test, we should go green. Yeah, okay. Awesome. So at this stage, we're just gonna remove the dot only. It's nowhere to be seen. We can remove this expect statement because we do define that in the spec helper. My IDE is adding that automatically. And we can run the whole enchilada. And we should go green on this one. And we have a pretty neat output. Address book is passing like this. That's the different file. And we have this local storage thing. It responds, or it lists all the methods that it's supposed to respond to. We have added tests and specifications for both set item, get item, remove. There's a typo here, and clear. So let's see if we can fix the typo. Remove. Right? Is that how we spell it? Yeah. Remove item. And we're good to go. And so now we can go back to our terminal, to a git status. Close this. Right. We added the new launch JSON and specs for local storage, so I can do git add dot and git ciam adds config for for running Mocha in VS Code, and adds specs and imp for fake local storage. Right. Good stuff. Do I have a remote on this? Yes, I do. So I can do git push origin main. So I'm just gonna use the main branch on this one. All right. Carl, did you tag along on this one?
Yes, but I didn't manage towards the end. My spec helper is I'm missing the clear and the remove items.
You want me to show them for you so you can finish this off?
Oh yes, please.
So both specs or implementation.
This file spec helper.
Okay. So the remove item, it takes one key as an argument and just it uses the delete function, and so you should be good on that. And then the clear just sets this data to an empty object. That is the best way to basically clear this out. Good evening, Shima. How you doing?
I'm okay.
You are?
Yeah, I'm good.
Are you disappointed with me that I moved this from Tuesdays to Wednesdays instead?
Disappointed? No. I am kind of disappointed that we haven't talked about my PR yet, but not this.
I take that disappointment to my heart, brother.
Anyway, I'm just glad to see you again. That's nice.
Thank you. I'm glad to have you with us. I've been really overwhelmed with work and family stuff, so I'm really sorry about this. We're gonna have to pick this ball up. But thanks for reminding me.
No apologies necessary.
Good stuff. How you doing over there, Carl? You catching up?
Well, we have a few people. I'm curious if anyone has experience or tried Elixir and Phoenix.
Yes, Mike.
Is he here today? No, he's not here today.
Nope, unfortunately, no. So Mike, he runs some mob sessions on both Elixir and Phoenix. Oh shoot! What? Sorry, guys.
Actually, die on your other laptop.
Yeah, that's what happens. So I'm gonna have to reboot that one. So I'm gonna have to do a little bit of small talk. But
Yeah,
you can hear me at least.
On Elixir, I had a coding challenge from one of my job interviews.
I
dove into some Elixir code today for the first time, and gonna have a second chat tomorrow.
All right.
Yeah, interesting.
That's interesting. I've been meaning to look into this at some point, but I never got to that actually. I think me and Mike, we did a very quick hello world at some point. Everything starts with hello world, but I haven't done much in Elixir at all. So yeah. But you should definitely pick his brain about it. He's good at that. I think he was involved in at least one project here within this community of Agile Ventures. But apart from that, I think he was involved in at least one real life project, if I'm not totally mistaken, that dealt with Phoenix. So he's absolutely a great source to contact regarding that, definitely. Right. Let's see if I can reshare my screen. Let's see if we can reshare my screen. Mute. There we go. I was on two different. There I am. Share screen. There we go. Right. I'm back. I'm sorry. The problem now is that I have 40% on my other laptop and like 1% on this one, so, or 2%. It's going to be a bit of a shit show. but I guess we'll survive another. And you guys can see my screen as well, right?
Yes.
Okay, good stuff.
Isn't one of the laptops charging right now?
So this one that I'm streaming, no, the one I'm streaming with was charging. I only have one charger at home for some reason. I have two computers, only one charger. But this one is charging now. The one that you are seeing the screen on should be good. Hopefully. All right. Let's see where we can pick up from now. Now that we have local storage set up and everything is up and running, we can kind of forget about this and actually try to focus on the address book spec again, right? Because now we now we have something to use together with the with everything that we'll be writing. So one thing before we move on, I don't know if I showed you this already, but you see, using this BDD lazyvar, this library extends Mocha in a neat little way. So, for instance, we can rewrite these two specs that we have here into one-liners. I'm going to show it to you. I'm going to comment out this guy, and I will write this instead. Now, I will not use the scaffolder. I'm going to say it, and then a callback inside here, and just say is expected, and then the assertion to be an object. To be an object, which is the same thing. What's going on? Why is this so slow? Are you being naughty again? This shouldn't be. Yeah, I have good memory. Not about 70. Oh, 88%. I don't know why this is happening at this point. But anyway, let's see if we can run this. Oh. Wow, now you're being very slow. Perhaps this sudden death made something to my memory usage. Anyway, this test, that I wrote on line 11 is the same thing that we wrote on 3 lines of code 7 to 9. It's the same assertion, and it shouldn't say and, it should say a, to be a object. No, and I should say to be a object or an object, a object. I think both of them actually work. Let's see if we can run it. So, wow, you're slow. Damn it. Let's run that. Boom. Like this. Oh. Shouldn't be that problematic. Right, and you see, now he auto-generated this message here. Is expected to be an object. It's not created by me. It is created directly by Mocha, or rather the BDD lazyvar. So, and this is neater. I mean, it's shorter and better. Good night. So good. Right, and we can do a similar thing with this guy. So we could say something like it, and a callback again in here like this, is dot expected to be an instance of address book like this, and now I can comment out this guy. Don't need this anymore. We can run this spec, and we get an auto-generated message. And if I, again, just to show you the difference, and there are very small differences, I can reopen these guys and run all 4 of these specs, and you will see the difference in the messages, right? This one is written by me, and this one is written by the test framework, and the same thing. And you know, perhaps mine can be more customized or anything, but they're pretty much the same. But the upside is that we are using less lines of code, and that is, in my opinion, always a good thing. I don't know if you guys agree, but I love one-liners. What do you say, Carl?
I admit I like one-liners too.
Good stuff. Daniel, what are your thoughts on one-liners like this?
Excellent one. I love that too, just like Carl.
And Shima, your thoughts? I don't know. Perhaps you're not with us anymore.
I'm still here. Yeah.
Oh, you're still
Yeah.
here.
Yeah, they're cool. When you can remember them, they're cool.
Right. That's the thing. That's the problem. Okay. Let's see if we can add a few functions to the address book, right? So I'm going to be a bit lazy, so I'm going to steal this one-liner so I don't have to remember everything. I'm going to steal that from local storage, and I'm going to go over here. And now let's kind of think about it, right? We would like to be able to what would we like to be doing? We would like to create an address in our address book, right? We would like to add something to our storage. So we probably want to be able to respond to a create function, to create method, right? So I'm going to add a describe block, and I'm going to say we're just going to call it functions, like this, without the spelling mistake, without the typos, right? And that's the only one I'm gonna be running for the time being. So again, if I run this now, this will fail because we don't have a create function on this guy. It doesn't respond to create. So I would probably need to go in and create that in my implementation, which is in source.js addressbook.js, right? So let's see if we can do create a function, empty, nothing more than this, the bare minimum of code that we need to write. I'm on 9%. It's going to be able to do too much on this one. I mean, when both my computers die, then they pretty much die, right? So if I run this now, we should go green on this. Hopefully, yes, because it does respond to create now. Right, so let's go to this spec. And so we can change this to actually describe the create function, right? Perhaps it's better. Now, here, the create function is actually gonna use, if you think about it, if I want to create an entry in my address book, it will use local storage to set an item, right? So I'm going to show you how you can make use of sign-on to check that. I'm going to create a variable, and I'm going to call this set item spy, a spy that will be spying on the on the set item function. And so I can do this, like before, I can do set item spy equals, and now we're gonna use sign on. So I'm gonna say sign on dot spy. Yes, I do have a typo. So I'm gonna say sign on spy, and what do we want to spy on? Well, we want to spy on window.local storage, and as the second argument, we're gonna, as a string, set the name of the function that we want to spy on. We want to say set item. And this, to me, is a bit counterintuitive, because here we are actually using the object, and here we need to remember that this needs to be a string. It cannot be anything else, right? So if this create action works properly, one of the things that it needs to do is to use local storage set item, and we just want to make sure with this spy that this actually happens. So that is what why we create this spy. We're going to get back to this in just a second to see if this actually works. So the first path, or there are multiple scenarios when you want to create a new entry. The first thing out tonight will be the so-called happy path. So I'm going to just create a new context, and I'm going to say with valid data or attributes, whatever. We can change that later. And so here we want to say, let's see, what do we want to say here? Valid data. First of all, we want to define what is valid data. After all, so we're gonna set a new, let's see, how do we do this? Yeah, we can define, we can do define, and we're gonna call this valid data. And that would be an object. It's going to be an object, and we're going to say name. It's going to be Thomas. Here we actually want to use data that is as close as possible to the things that, how we actually going to use this function. So name, and what else do we want to store? Perhaps email. Thomas at whatever.com. This is not my real address. And let's say phone number, for instance, right? That will be 031 111111, something like that. Let's create this valid data object. And so inside of this context, we want to say something. We already have subject being a new address book, right? So the response, right? So we're going to say define, similar to what we did before, define response would be a callback again, and we will say subject, $sign subject, and here we actually going to say create. That's where we will be using this, and we will pass in some data, and that would be the valid data object, right? Valid data object here. That will be our response, and this is something that we can run our tests against. So here I need to say before each, because before every test I actually have to invoke response. So I actually call it. So I'm just going to say response, and now I'm free to write a few tests. So the first test I want to write is to say it is expected to make use of local storage set item. And this is where the spy will come into place. So now I can write an assertion saying expect. We have very low battery, but we are closing up on finishing this up anyway. So expect set item spy, the spy that we set up here on line 19. We can say to have been called once. Will be called once, right? So this is right. This is the way we write it, right? So if this method actually uses local storage set item, then this spy would observe that, and this assertion will evaluate to true. So that's good. And then we need to create another. We need to define another thing, and that would be the contacts in storage. So I'm going to say def. I'm going to actually call it contacts in storage, and that would be, sorry, second argument, and that would be window local storage. And we remember that everything is stored in data, right? And this time around, well, actually, we can say get item, because we know that that works now, right? And we have to make a choice. And here I will say, what is the key that I will be storing all my data in, all my contacts in? And I will just say contacts, right? That's what I will be using to store all my contacts. But we do remember that everything is being stored as a string, so we need to probably transform this into an object. So I can just say JSON.parse, and I will just parse this into an object like this. So that's gonna be my contacts in storage. And now let's see how much. Around 17% here. Okay. So I can write another it block and say something like is expected to add a contact to storage, right? Or to store a contact, right? Okay. And so here we can say expect those contacts in storage, but I just prefix this with a $sign, because now at this point we remember that we set the names as strings, but we can use them as objects like this. And so if this is parsed into JSON, we just added a contact. We can say to have length and have length and 1, right? There should be one contact in that particular storage. Yep. Right. So let's see if we can run this. This is enough for me, I think. I'm going to remove it from here, and I'm going to run this particular contacts here. This context. Right. Let's see if that happens. Invalid child property. Well, thank you. I thought I could use that. So we're just going to say this instead, have length, like this. Let's run it again. Target cannot be null or undefined. Target cannot be null or undefined. This is a weird error message. Assertion error. Right, because there is nothing stored there. So that's why this is happening. No problemos. Okay, let's see. At this stage, we need to go into the address book and the create action. The create action needs to take an argument. I mean, we are using it here, saying create, and then we were passing some data in. But we need to have this guy return, accept one argument. So we're gonna just name it that data. And so we will use set item, but before we do that, we need to say something like let contacts. We want to store contacts as an array. So we're just going to create an empty array. And then we're going to take the contacts. There we go. We need to push whatever we just passed in here into this array. So we're going to push data into this particular array, and then we're going to say window local storage set item, right? Because we have that available, and we agreed that the key will be called contacts, right? And then we want to store this data inside, but we can't store objects or arrays. We can only store strings in there. So we want to say JSON stringify the contacts array that we just created on line 3, and on line 4 we pushed in the data here. And if this works, then we can say return something like yay. No, of course we're not going to return yay. And this will, now at this stage we are assuming that this will work and that this will be returned. Now if this fails, this will still be returned the way we wrote it now. But the interesting part here is that quite often in TDD you don't necessarily want to deal with error handlers before you actually write a test for it, right? And we haven't written that test yet. So for now, this fairly simplified method will do for us. Let's see if this works now. Let's run the test again. And we're still getting an error, but we have one test passing for us, and that is that the spy is actually being invoked, right? So let's see if we can break that. So we're going to comment out this code, run this, and now both of them are failing. I'm going to reinstate this line. I'm going to run this, and at least one of them is passing. Now this is failing for me, so I need to figure out why this is failing. So in order to do that, I want to go back to the spec, and I want to set a debugger here with a red dot. I'm going to run this. It will halt execution. And now I want to take a closer look. What is contacts in storage? Did I make a mistake somewhere? Did I make a typo, or what happened? Let's do that. And that is null. Okay, so let's take a look at this function. What does it do, or how is it created? Where is that? Window local storage get contacts. Okay, so let's see if we can get that. We can execute this directly in our console. We want to do window local storage, and it does contain a lot of data, so it has been set. Okay, But for some reason, this is not working. The JSON parse is not working for me. Well, let's have a look at that. Why not? Boom, because, well, it does work for me. So this one actually contains that. So why the F is this failing for me? Because set item spy before each. This is okay. So I said, right, contacts in storage to have length 1. Well, but why is this null? This is interesting. Contacts in storage. JSON parse. Right, I mean, one would think that this would work. Why wouldn't this work for me? Response, subject, create, valid data. It is there, apparently. And let's say this dot length. It's 1. Right, so this assertion should work. But is it because I have it inside of the context? Let's move this out. Let's move this out, but where? Should we just have it directly here? I don't know. I'm a bit puzzled by this. Let's run this again. Target cannot be null or undefined. Context to have length. Expect contacts. Any ideas, people? No? Why would this fail for me? Why would this fail for me? I mean, you're gonna have to take my word for it, but it is there. But should I run this here like once before? Let's have a look at that. Yeah, and then context in storage still null. Is there a typo? No. No typos here. Oh, now okay, sorry. Now I know. It's not a callback. Oh, damn it. I forgot that. This is the problem. It needs to execute a function. Right. Okay, now it will pass for. Yes, of course. Right. So one has to remember stuff, right, Ima?
Sure.
Right. So I can reinstate that in here for now because this is where I'm using it, and we should be good on this one. Right. So now we made use of sign-on spy. We are spying on this window local storage set item that we, assume will work in our browser, but in our node environment we just faked it, and now we have a create address book method, and it simply works, and that's great. So, any questions on that, boys? What do you say, Carl? Did you pick up anything valuable here today?
Yes, but right now I'm too tired. I've had enough for today.
That's why I'm closing up. I'm closing shop. Shima, did you learn anything today? I know you came in late.
Well, I was actually watching on Twitch before.
Okay.
Before I came in here. Yeah, so I'll go over the video again. I have to go over the video again because I tend to learn when I watch over and over.
Absolutely. And Daniel, what are your thoughts?
Yes, appearing interesting to me, and I'll be glad to see this run on my local system. I'm glad to see that I can understand. At least I've stayed with you guys for a while, and it's beginning to make sense to me how to write it. So I'll be looking forward to you dropping the video so I could start immediately after the lecture. Just to see.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So go ahead.
So this is Mocha and Chai again.
This is Mocha and Chai. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So in this configuration, I'm extending Mocha and Chai with sign-on, of course, and also a package that is fairly new to me. I just picked it up. That is called BDD LazyVar, and that is the package that allows us to write those beautiful one-liners. That's one thing, but most importantly, it is the package that allows us to use subject like this and define this functionality where we preset some objects that will be lazy evaluated, which means that they will be created only when we actually use them. And all in all, the people that created this package, they did a really shitty job in naming it. I don't like the name BDD LazyVar. But that is the only shortcoming of this thing. Other than that, they did a fantastic job in creating this package, because it extends Mocha with a lot of fantastic functionality that makes it more like RSpec. And you know that I come from Rails, and I think RSpec is a fantastic testing framework.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting seeing so many defs.
Right. So this is like so def is the equivalent of let in RSpec, kind of like, so with let you can lazy evaluate or evaluate directly if you want, right? But no, it's a really good package. It has a few shortcomings, and I am putting together a wish list, so I will write to the guys that created this, but and to send them this wish list, how they can extend it, or perhaps if I have time someday, I don't know when that would happen, to write a bit of code myself to submit a pull request to their repository. But I haven't had the chance yet. No, but it's a really good thing, actually. So we use sign-on. We spied on this local storage. This is passing for us. We can see we've made use of several matchers that comes from Chai and Chai sign-on. So that's great, or sign-on Chai rather. Whatever it's called. And we wrote a faked implementation of local storage and managed to write the first implementation of the actual create functionality in the address book and store that in local storage, which is great. Next time around, we will be working on the index action and perhaps show action, so we can show one individual contact, but we will also probably get moving with writing some acceptance tests and actually write a little bit of user interface for this application. So hopefully, guys, if you have time on Friday night, that is exactly what we will be dealing with. But for now, this is the end of the line, and thank you for hanging out with me. Take it easy, guys.
So speaking of,
go ahead.
Thank you.
Go ahead, Shima.
Yeah, I unfortunately I have to beat you over the head.
Okay.
And harass you a bit. So when might you have possibly 10 minutes? It doesn't have to be tomorrow or today or the day. Just when you think you might have some time. I realized that between all the family stuff and being such a prolific author, it might be hard to find time.
Yeah.
But I would really appreciate it.
I totally feel you, brother. So the thing is that I have 2 deadlines. Or my team has 2 deadlines this week. So we are pushing they are gonna burn the midnight oil. I'm actually gonna be online and work for a few more hours today. Let's aim for something midday tomorrow. If it's like 10-15 minutes, I can definitely squeeze that in. If you just remind me on Slack, I promise to answer you and jump into a session with you tomorrow. Okay?
All right, so I'll just send you a message to. I guess that's your 12, yeah. Your 12 on your, yeah.
Well, 11:30 because 12 I tend to try to go for lunch, right? But 11:30 or 1:30, something like that.
Okay.
If possible.
That's fine.
Fantastic. And if I don't answer directly, then I probably in another session. But I promise then to get back to you as soon as I can.
No worries. I understand completely.
Fantastic. And let's see. What app was that to check your memory? Sorry, I just got a message. So I have. I'm just gonna answer that. Just let's see. I have a small app that is called Clean Up My Mac, I think. Clean My Mac, right?
Yeah, I use that. So Clean My Mac. Yeah.
Clean My Mac is the one. And I have it's a paid app, so I don't know how much I pay a year. I don't know, 10-15 euros, something like that. But it's pretty useful for me because it keeps me alive. Otherwise, I would not be able to run those sessions. But it is what it is. All right, Dima, I talk to you. Twitch and YouTube, thank you very much for sticking out. These are not simple tasks. Writing unit specs is an acquired skill, but it's also an acquired taste. Not everybody likes it, but I would say that this is what separates us from hackers, the professionals from hackers. I don't know if that's a controversial statement, but that's how I feel about that.
I take offense being that I'm a hacker, but
well, you're on a good way to be a professional, and so are you, Daniel, and so is everybody else. If they just keep at it. Guys, love you. Thank you. Take it easy.
Bye-bye.
Be cool.
Thank you, Thomas.
Thank you. So long.
Good night, Daniel.
Good night.